Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here for the next step in the wine making. So this is part 3. And if you haven't seen my last 2 videos, I'll go ahead and link them back to back right up here. So the first one is from a this and that video, and then the second one is, well, it's the last video I put out on winemaking. So if you started your wine back when I put out the this and that video, by the time you see this video, you should be ready for this step. And so, by the way, this is the wine that I made from my fresh grapes that I started not long after we harvested the grapes. I crushed a bunch up and used it for making a batch of wine, and it turned out really wonderful, beautiful color, a wonderful flavor and aroma that actually tastes and smells like grapes. Most of the wines that you buy, to me, never taste like grapes. They just taste like wine. I mean, this tastes like wine, but you get the flavor of grapes. So anyway, I don't actually drink, but I still had to taste it to see how it turned out. But anyway, so here is a jug of wine that's ready to go. This is all 100% homegrown grape juice with the organic sugar added to it and some of the pulp, which you'll see down here at the bottom. So what I want to do, what's happened now is this is no longer bubbling. It is completely stopped. So I'm just going to take this off, and now I want to strain all of the pulp and everything out of there. And so what I have here is a double layer of cheesecloth over a nylon mesh strainer. Now, I do have stainless steel, which I recommend stainless steel over plastic any day. But whenever I'm dealing with anything as fermented, I prefer to stick with something that is not metal. Not that I'm crazy about plastic, but there's, you know, even though stainless steel is not supposed to affect your ferment, I still, just to be on the safe side, I still will stick with the nylon and the plastic for that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and pour the wine through the cheesecloth and the strainer, and I've got it sitting on top of a recycled coconut oil bucket. So I'll just pour that right in there. And the nice thing about having the strainer, as opposed to just trying to lay the cloth over there, is if you lay the cloth over your bucket, then you have to use clothespins or something to hold it in place. Where you can just throw the cloth right over your strainer, and there you go. So I have a 1 gallon bucket because this is going to be almost a gallon. Typically when I'm straining a lot of stuff out, I'll use my glass measuring cups, and I have the, you know, up to the 8-cup batter bowl. But because we've got a whole gallon here, see, look at all that stuff there. Now what I typically will do is I'll wash my jug out right away, and then this is what I'll use to put the wine back in. But I have a clean jug already sitting here and ready for me to put this in once it's done straining out. So I'm going to let that sit and strain through, and I'll be back when I'm ready to put it in the jug, and we'll see what it looks like then. Now what I have going on here is that the bucket is really too full for me to fully finish straining this. So I'm going to set this aside and on this measuring cup over here, and go ahead and start putting this into my jug. Now you can see, because I got a little crazy, I already got some pulp back in here, but that will be dealt with later. I'm just trying to get most of it out right now. The wine is going to clarify over time. So I do find it easiest when pouring it back in here. Maybe it's because I'm so short. If you're taller, you know, I'm only 5 foot tall. So if you're taller, if you're considerably taller, it might be easier enough for you to pick up the whole bucket and just start pouring it through your funnel. But I don't get a very good angle on it when I do it that way, and then I spill it all over the place, at least when it's very full. So then once I use the measuring cup, then I can do it and do a little bit better without spilling it everywhere. Okay, we'll go ahead and pour this little bit from the measuring cup in there. And then if you want, you know, the whole idea is to get as much out of here as you can. And I already got some of the pulp seeping through here because, again, I went a little crazy, and I started squeezing it, and it started coming out the side, so you got to be careful about that. Again, it's not a big deal if you get a little bit in there, but the more you can keep out of there, the better. So anyway, you can continue to either just let that strain like that, or you can squeeze it out a little bit. Just depends on how impatient you are. I have a tendency to get a little too impatient. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is, even though that's still straining, I'll come back and pour the rest of this in here later. For now, I'm going to put the lid on this, and then I'm going to set it aside, especially once I have it completely full. I'll set it back in the corner, and I'm just going to let it sit for a few days. And what's going to happen, now you can see the difference side by side. This is the finished, the fully finished one. And if you look at this, you can see how cloudy it looks in comparison. Well, what it's going to do is all this stuff is going to start settling to the bottom, and that's when it's going to start clarifying. It can take several times doing this as far as letting it settle, and then what you do is you rack it. So once you see a pretty good thick sediment here at the bottom of the jug, what you're going to do is you're going to rack it, which for me that simply means taking a vinyl hose, you know, a food grade hose that's clear, and sticking it down into there and siphoning it out into my bucket. And what I do is I set the bucket on a stool so it's down lower, and I leave the jug up on the counter, and then I just siphon it out, and making sure not to stick the tube clear down into the gunk at the bottom. And then that's called racking. And then I'll clean this stuff out. Typically what I'll do is I'll pour this stuff into another jar, and so I don't have to throw anything out. And that stuff I'll use right away for cooking and anything like that. And then I'll pour the wine from the bucket back into the jug, and then do that maybe once or twice more until it looks nice and clear like that. The problem with leaving that in there, not only do you just get a nice finished looking clear product by getting it all out, but leaving it in there can cause the wine to turn bitter, and you don't want that to happen, obviously. So you want to get as much of it out as you can. A little bit at the bottom, a little bit of those dregs is not going to hurt anything. But that's why, if anyone was a big Star Trek song and they remember Spock singing bitter dregs, well, they're bitter. So that's why. Anyway, so so what I'll do is, when I'm ready to rack this, I'm going to go ahead and shoot another separate video showing how I do that, in case you're curious. But like I said, it's simple. You just siphon it out and let it pour into there. But if you don't know how to siphon anything, it's really easy. But I want to also show you, here is the blackberry wine. It's blackberry and grape that I started in the last winemaking video. And the bubbling has slowed down considerably. So it is also time now for me to add that extra cup of sugar to this, to kind of get that process going again and help make the wine stronger and better. And so, because most of the sugar has already been fully digested and turned into alcohol, so now I'm gonna add another cup of sugar by taking some of this out and adding taking a little bit of this out, plus adding some more water. And you'll see that if you go watch my last winemaking video on how I did that. And then I'll pour it back in and then let it sit for another week to 2 weeks. And then when it stops bubbling again, then I'll know it's ready. That's how you know it's done for that. If the no air bubbles are coming through your airlock, the water's just sitting there in your airlock and it's not moving, it's not budging, you watch it for several minutes and still nothing happens, then that means it's done. It's done fermenting, and it's time to move on to this process here. Okay, well, stay tuned for part 3, or excuse me, this is part 3. So stay tuned for part 4 to come out probably not too long after this one, maybe a week at the longest, and just to see what the next step is in your winemaking process. And I hope you're enjoying this series. And I'll also be doing a separate video on all the many ways that you can use your wine, especially if you're like me and you don't drink. Why would you make it? Because it has so many other great uses, and I'll do a separate video just on that. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.